If you're looking to get started with your dietitian private practice, can it be fully virtual? And if it is fully virtual, how does that work? How do you go about getting clients across state lines, contracting with insurance, maintaining HIPAA compliance, and your marketing? Today, we're going to dig into all of those things. My name is Sheena, and I have been a private practice dietitian for the last decade, and I help other dietitians to grow and scale their one on one dietitian practice as well as contract with insurance. So, digging into the question of can your dietitian private practice be fully virtual? Absolutely. This is actually more of a personal preference of how you like to spend your days, and let's be honest, where you like to spend your days, than it is necessarily about the right or wrong way to scale a profitable practice. Both in person private practices and virtual private practices can be just as lucrative. But there are a few differences and a few things to know when you are going fully virtual. I do want to note that in the beginning of my private practice, I did have a physical office. I then upgraded to a larger physical office and then ultimately went fully remote. Now, the reasons why I did this in the beginning are not really going to be relevant any longer. I started my dietitian private practice in 2016, and really the only option at that time was a physical office. So I had that physical office and continued to grow that physical office. However, with COVID, actually, that gave a lot more options to dietitians, especially when it came to insurance coverage for virtual services. So, I guess if there was one good thing that came out of COVID, it was expanding our opportunities as dietitian private practices to accept insurance as fully virtual providers. Now, of course, you don't have to accept insurance in your dietitian private practice, but if you do plan to, yes, absolutely, you can be fully virtual. Now, I will say there are some things to definitely consider if you're planning to run a fully virtual private practice. When it comes to taking insurance, if that's something that you want to do, some insurance contracts will not credential you if you do not have a physical office. So I just want to note that. I also hear a lot of misconception about maybe using one of the virtual addresses that looks like a street address to quote unquote kind of fool the insurance company. I highly would not recommend that. So the insurance company does need to know where you are practicing, even if it is a home address. Not providing the insurance company with your actual physical address is actually insurance fraud. So personally, I wouldn't really want to play that game. So I will say when it comes to accepting insurance, most national payers will accept a virtual practice, but there are a couple that don't. So if that's an insurance company that you had your heart on getting into network with, then you may need a physical office or a physical space at least a few days a week. However, one thing that we do need to make sure that we do have in place if we are doing a fully virtual private practice is we do need to make sure that we have HIPAA compliant software. So, using something like an EHR system, a few that you might consider are things like Simple Practice, Practice Better, Healthy, Calyx, etc., which use HIPAA compliance in connecting with those patients. I would also encourage making sure that your email and any phone numbers, fax, all of that stuff needs to be HIPAA compliant. And we do still need to be having liability insurance, and that's going to come if you are taking insurance or not taking insurance, but your insurance companies and contracts will require that liability insurance as well. So, a few things that I want to know is that we can see patients outside of our state as long as we hold a valid license in that state for dietitians. However, there are several states that do not require licensure. So, a few that I'm thinking of are states like Arizona, Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and there's a few other ones that don't require licensure. Oh, Michigan is one as well. I will say with Michigan, they are in the process of getting the licensure in place. So just make sure that you know that. Another thing on licensure is yes, you can absolutely get um, Yes, you can absolutely get a license in other states, but what I would consider is some of these states, just from a cost perspective and time perspective, and just honestly ease of getting licensed in those states, I would recommend getting licensed with as many of these states as possible as you think you might want to become licensed in all at once. So that way we don't have to go back and get the information for our licenses held in other states for those new licenses. I hope that that didn't sound too complex, but it can cost you a lot more time and money if we're having to kind of dig up records from other states when we're contracting with new states, because often those new states want to know every single state that you're licensed in, and you'll have to provide that information, which sometimes involves a fee to get that information from the state that you're licensed in. Okay, enough of that mumble jumble. So, taking insurance. A lot of people want to know, if I'm a fully virtual practice, do I need to contract with insurance in each state that I'm taking clients in? And for the most part, the answer is no, especially for our international commercial plans. So, when we're thinking of insurance plans like Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, Aetna, Cigna, those are national payers. And typically, as long as we are credentialed in our own home state, these payers, we are also able to see clients across state lines, still bill that insurance because we're contracted in our home state. Now, something I get a lot of questions on when it comes to billing insurance and licensure within states and who we're able to see is, many folks will just say, well, if I just don't bill their insurance, can I see that client even if I'm not licensed in that state? No, you cannot. You cannot see any clients in any states that you are not licensed in. And this doesn't actually have anything to do with insurance. In fact, insurance is not even going to check whether you're licensed in that state or not, most likely, but it's illegal. So just don't practice in states that you're not licensed in. And then another thing to note is, if you are taking insurance from a state that maybe doesn't require licensure, so a state maybe like California, um, the laws in California require a referral from a medical provider in order to see that patient. And this has nothing to do with insurance, but it's just the law of California. And so you will need to make sure that you have a referral from a provider in California, even if you do not live in California, in order to see that patient and technically bill the insurance. And many insurance companies will actually check for these referrals prior to paying out for the services. So, this is just something to keep in mind as well. If you're going to go across those state lines and start seeing patients and seeking referrals in those areas, this is something that you're going to want to consider. So, the last thing that I want to chat about is marketing across state lines for your fully virtual private practice. While many people might encourage you to do something like in office visits or something along those lines to seek referrals, obviously this is not going to work if someone is out of state. So, you're going to need to rely on other sources of networking in order to get patients from those states. So some other marketing methods that you might use are, of course, our social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. LinkedIn is also a great one for kind of showcasing what you do and also networking with providers. I've also done a video on marketing using snail mail and sending out your resources that way. And for me, that is where I get a lot of my clients. So if you haven't checked out that video yet, definitely do check out that video, especially if you are planning on doing a virtual private practice. Another thing that is kind of nice about doing a fully virtual private practice is there are some states that do not contract with dietitians for insurance. I won't list what any of these are at this point, but there are some states like this. And so when you are a provider from out of state and you do have insurance contracts with those networks, you actually can advertise that to the physicians in that area and give them kind of an option for their patients that they don't really have locally. So honestly, I think that's one of the coolest things about being a fully virtual dietitian private practice. If you do have questions about any of this, definitely drop those questions in the comments below. I'm sure there's others that have the same questions, so we're helping all of us dietitians as a team here. And if you found this video helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with a friend.